All right, so our first item of business would be item number 1A to approve the order and contents of the overall agenda.
Deb White moves to approve.
Okay,
Breitling seconds.
a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Carries. Thank you. Item number 1B would be to review and take action on the minutes from March 10th. Were they included in your packets?
I'll move to approve. Deb White.
Jim Austin seconds it.
Motion and a second to approve the minutes as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion then signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. Item number 2 then would be our commission check-in. This is the opportunity when we can go around and just check in for any pertinent information or activities happening within your jurisdiction, an opportunity to share them now, and also a reminder you know of that will be happening from now until September. Make sure and check in. So I'm going to go ahead and mute while I change over to my computer. So go ahead and kick it off. Deb, do you want to start for me?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'll just give a little update. If any of you have been watching the news, you might have seen this, that Moorhead is working on changing their policy regarding mosquito spraying. And so in particular, we're changing our aerial spraying policy. We're revisiting what we've been doing in the past. We decided that we are going to create a different threshold, raise the threshold at which would trigger for us to spray in Moorhead. We've contracted to change the mix that we use to something that would be less detrimental in terms of impact on pollinators, changing the timing, making sure that we're spraying later, and really just working on making some more evidence-based decisions that would kind of balance that public health risk with how it affects our long-term access to, long-term health of pollinators and access to healthy food. And so it's an ongoing thing. We appreciate public input on that. And so if you haven't been aware of the changes, just, any input that you have would be really helpful. So keep an eye and share with us your thoughts on it. So that's one of the big changes that's happening in Moorhead.
Thank you. Feel free to just filter on in as we go.
This
Good
is
morning.
Commission. Go ahead.
Good morning, Rita Yasadis with Cass County Extension. And the only thing I really need to bring up is that we have urban youth gardens available for youth, and we do have some master garden volunteers that will be served as mentors. So if you know of any youth that are looking to get into gardening, it's in North Fargo, and I believe it's $10 for their spot. Just contact our office. So we have no applications so far, and we have quite a few spots. If you know anyone that wants to get into gardening and wants a mentor, we have that available.
Rita, are those available to any youth from the Metro or only North Dakota?
I do not know, but let me run across the hall and ask Don Kinsler.
Perfect. Dwayne, did you have something you wanted to add?
The only thing I would add is that Deb forgot to add that the city of Moorhead contracts with Cass County Vector Control to provide the services that she outlined. I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Thanks, Dwayne. Another great partnership between all of us. So we appreciate that.
Here's my answer. It's open to all youth. Fargo, West Fargo, Moorhead. So
Wonderful, thank you.
This is Arlette. The City of Fargo Resiliency and Sustainability Committee, I think is what the title is, met for the second time, and they're still kind of getting educated. So we're looking for some interesting things coming from that committee eventually. We also kind of followed the lead of Moorhead and had a long discussion about vector control on our side as well. I think there may be some changes coming from the City of Fargo as well. So not sure exactly what that will be yet, but yeah.
From the entrepreneurial side of things, with the rollback of the COVID restrictions, we're seeing a big surge on food and services. And at least initial indicators for the farmers market season looks to be a exceptionally strong season this year in terms of attendance. A lot of people really happy to get out.
This is well. I'm with U of M Extension. We have been working with Cass County Weed Control over the last year, and they have been a wonderful partner. They have come and spoke at a couple of our commission meetings, Stan Wolf, the director, and we now are communicating more regarding when spraying for weeds is happening. So they sent us a press release yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, about some spraying that will be happening in South Fargo, and we were able to get that on our Facebook page. And we will continue to just pass that information along, and we're really grateful to Cass County Weed Control for their willingness to work with us.
Anybody else have anything? As you all know, Clay County is in the process of updating our comprehensive plan. We're working with MetroCog. As part of that, we're making sure to be deliberate, to be visionaries, to see where the growth areas and needs areas for the county will continue to be in the next 15 to 20 years. We've made sure to include the dialogues that have happened at this committee level and in terms of food systems and food access and food needs and food deserts. And so that's information that we're very thankful that we've had those discussions to include those in them. We're also making sure to have all partners part of the table. So we've had community input sessions. We've also brought together environmental partners, the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, the Nature Conservancy folks, as well as producers and aggregate partners. So it's really a large plan that we can use as a decision document going forward. The other item that I maybe will kind of piggyback off Noelle and Rita is Extension is just offering so many relevant programming and educational documents right now that we can't even begin to update on because it's so wide reaching. So make sure that you're kind of following along with both the NDSU extension, but also U of M extension, because there's some really great things in there that deal with everything that we talk about. So. Anything else? Nope. All right. Okay. Well then, if we don't have any other check-ins, if anything comes up, feel free to add it into our commission roundtable later. But item number 3 would be our jurisdictional spotlight on the city of West Fargo this time. Dina, the former commissioner of our Cass Clay Food Commission, is here to provide us a brief update about several meal projects and programs from West Fargo Public Schools. And then if Mandy has anything to piggyback off, she can share as well. So I'm not sure which one of you wants it first, Dana or Mandy?
Sure.
Dana can go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. Well, good morning and thanks for having me today. Nice to be back, and I'm happy to provide a little update about some of the food related things that we're doing in West Fargo schools. I do have a few slides to share. If I'm able to share my screen, I will attempt. And maybe you can just let me know if you're able to see that.
We see it.
You do? Okay, wonderful. All right, so wanted to share with you a little of what we are doing with a school lunch repack project. This really came out of a conversation a couple of years ago. We turned it into a pilot project that took place here last month, but it was supposed to take place last year until the COVID shut down our schools and we had to postpone this. So it really came out of a conversation around decreasing food waste, particularly in schools. Of course, we're already doing several things to tackle food waste, but one of the things we had discussed with several partners was around how to use our overproduced food and benefit our own students in our schools. So we had several partners, as you can see on the screen there, of this project. And the neat thing was that we actually involved all 3 school districts. So West Fargo, along with Fargo Schools and Moorhead Schools, all did the pilot project at the same time last month. And several of our partners helped to come up with the planning around this and to really prepare us for a good project. So like I mentioned, we completed this last month in April for about 4 weeks. And we focused on the food at one particular school building. So each district did one building. At West Fargo Schools, this was at Liberty Middle School. And we focused on the food that was overproduced in the kitchen that had not been served to students yet. But something that was overproduced and that we wouldn't be able to use in our program again, you know, the following day or anything. So what we did was place food products into plastic containers with clear lids. They were freezable and then microwavable to heat them up. And these containers fit about 4 servings per container, but we didn't really, you know, do a certain serving size or anything. We basically wanted to fill the container. And the idea was that it could maybe feed a family as a side dish or possibly an entree. Along with our partners that we had on this planning project, we had involved our health inspectors on both the North Dakota side and the Minnesota side to make sure that we got their input on any of the food safety related things that we needed to consider. So you'll see here in this picture, we did have instructions to keep it frozen. We also had instructions on how to heat it to at least 165. And then we did have an allergy statement, just again to know that some of these food products could contain allergens. So we placed food after the meal service into these containers. Food was then frozen overnight in our walk-in freezers at the school. So that it would get fully frozen. The next day then containers would be delivered to the school food pantry and they could hold it then in their freezer. And these were more like a household type freezer. And then food pantry staff, which in our district are either counselors or social workers, can distribute that food to students in need. Typically, this food pantry at Liberty would have shelf-stable items, and so adding the frozen was just another type of food and to increase that variety for them. As part of the pilot project, we all collected data. So we kept track of how many containers we were filling, what food products were going in them, and then also how many we distributed. So for our data in West Fargo schools, we, in this pilot period, filled 177 containers with leftovers. And throughout the pilot project, 159 of them were dispersed to students through the food pantry. The remaining ones just stayed in the freezer, and we continued to distribute them in the month of May. So they didn't go to waste. Here's just a few photos just to kind of show you what some of the food products we did that first week. So like a rice blend, some chicken, chicken patties on a bun, and some smiley French fries. And so that was kind of, I guess, what we did for the pilot. Just for our district, we decided to continue through the end of the school year. We had enough containers that were donated to us for this purpose, so we thought we would just continue to do that. And we will continue through this month and continue to distribute those through our food pantry. Each of the schools, each of the districts that participated selected a school that already had a food pantry on site. And that's really the key part of this project was, if you have a way to distribute and get those to kids, that's the hard part. Saving the leftovers in a kitchen, we have to do something with our leftovers anyway, whether you're packaging them up or even just to throw them away. So I consider that kind of the easy part. And for us in this pilot project, it was easy enough to add it as into the food pantry. They already had a system in place of giving food to kids through there. And so this just provided that extra variety. As far as looking into next year, we would need a funding source for the containers. Obviously that would be something above and beyond what we could purchase ourselves out of food service, but we would hope to continue this. As far as expanding, that would really depend on our school buildings and if they had food pantries on site, because again, that's really the important part, is having that system in place to get it to the kids. We also did collect surveys with not a whole lot of feedback, I guess, but just to find out if they were enjoying the food and able to prepare it and heat it up okay. And those all came back favorable as well. So it's been a really fun project and something that I think shows another way to make an impact on food waste. And then my last update I wanted to give was just a little bit on summer meals coming up here shortly. And so USDA has granted waivers to continue serving free meals to students in any area. So normally a summer meal program has to be served out of areas that are higher poverty or meet the free and reduced percentages. But because of these waivers, we can continue to serve anywhere in our community. West Fargo Schools is going to provide these free meals at our summer school sites to the enrolled students in summer school and then also to the community. And our district is doing summer school at 8 elementaries, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. We are also going to do a weekly grocery box at 2 of our school sites throughout June and July. We right now are doing a weekly box for our virtual learning students who don't come to school but learn at home virtually. But in the summer, we're kind of transitioning. This would be available to anybody in the community. And instead of being individual servings of food, we are turning it into look like more of a weekly grocery box, thinking that would help to supplement the family maybe a little better than 5 separate little lunch entrees. So it'll have things like a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread and a box of cereal like you would buy at the grocery store, and, as well as the fruits and vegetables and entrees each week. All of those meals, the grocery box as well as the daily walk-up meals at our sites are available to all children 18 and younger. Parents can pick up meals for their children, so children don't have to be present because of all of these waivers that we have. And we'll be having more detailed information on our district website and also a press release going out on this. And then USDA has also extended the free meal waiver for all students for all of next school year. So throughout 21-22, we will be able to continue to provide free breakfast and free lunch to all of our students in school. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any related to our summer programming or our repack project.
Are there any questions?
Do you have any data as to how much extra time this program took for school staff for the repackaging and the freezing? Do we know if it was a substantial investment in time and effort, or was it fairly controllable?
Yeah, that's a good question. Through the pilot, we also did track the time spent on it. And for our district, we found it to be very, very little amount of time because again, no matter what you're doing with that leftover food after a meal, you have to do something with it. So even, you know, scraping out pans and throwing things away takes time. So we found it to be very similar to the amount of time that you would spend dealing with your leftovers anyway. And we did track that time throughout the pilot, and I'd say it averaged about 5 minutes a day. So it's very, very little.
It's amazing. Thank you.
Dana, this is Rita. About how many of those food boxes do you give a week? And how many meals, free meals do you give out kind of per week? For the summer.
For the summer?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the summer box is going to have 7 days worth of food. So it'll be enough food to credit as 7 breakfast and 7 lunch. But then, like I said, it's not going to look like 7 different breakfasts. It might be a loaf of bread, and that's meant to be your toast in the morning or something like that, or a retail size box of cereal, and even a whole pizza that is a school lunch whole grain pizza that we are giving out on that. So it'll credit as 7 breakfast and 7 lunch. And
how many families?
We're gonna just kind of take a stab at how many to make to start with. And we're guessing about 200 a week, but we're prepared to ramp that up if we get better participation. In comparison, right now in our virtual program, we had started out the year doing probably on average 150 of those a week, and it has slowly, you know, decreased, and we're under 100 that we're doing to those virtual families. But in the summer, it's for anyone. So a family could come and take 1 box per child that they have. So we're starting at about 200 a week, but we will adjust as we go.
Dana, you talked a little bit about the investment for the boxes themselves. What are you know, what's the pitch? What's the dollar amount? What's that estimate?
For the repack project, you mean the little containers? Yeah. So, you know, what we were hoping to do in that pilot is kind of come to an average of how many we would have per week. You know, of course, just a 1 month, it was, you know, kind of a guess, but when we looked at our data from 1 month and kind of averaged out if that continued through a year, it was about $700 worth of containers. And we're working with some partners who are trying to help us with funding for that. I think, you know, there's all the districts, I think, want to continue to do this version of leftovers in their food pantries. So we're hoping to have that support.
I certainly can say that this is something that I think school districts have maybe rumbled around what to do with all of this for a long time. And I think this is phenomenal. You know, that whole, the pandemic has really forced families to kind of juggle work and online schooling and extra time. And I think as some families had to exhaust all of their time off because of quarantines and whatever, I think we have kids that are maybe having to have a little extra time by themselves. And so I agree, to send a whole cereal box or loaf of bread just is Wonderful.
Thank you.
I also look at how it could improve the health of some families too, because they are getting the meals that meet the school lunch and school breakfast certifications. And so it may be a more nutritious breakfast or lunch than they would normally have.
Yeah, I agree.
Are there any other comments, Noelle?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Dana, for the work that you're doing and for coming and giving us an update today. We really appreciate it. And for those who don't know, Dana used to be a member of this food commission. So thank you as well for your service to this group.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to all of the partners that are involved with you too, Dana. I know several of you must be one of those partners that are in the group that are meeting today.
Yes, that's exactly right. And yeah, we couldn't have done it without the partners. It was a really nice process that we did a lot of planning and had all the right people involved to make a good plan that was going to work, and very rewarding to see that through the pilot it did work and it did make a difference. So.
Dana, can you tell us about what percentage of school buildings in the metro area have a food pantry to make this possible?
I don't know myself, I guess, as far as the other districts, but I think Great Plains Food Bank has that information, because I think Nancy has shared that before. Maybe Taylor knows.
We do have that information. I don't know it off the top of my head though, Arlette and Dana. I'm sorry, I can't speak confidently about how many there are. I think we are in the process of also growing that program. So there is a lot of potential capacity for schools to add a school pantry to their site, but I'd be more than happy to follow up with an answer and let both of you know.
Dana, I'll just mention too, I know we're looking at, I'll put on my higher education hat, we're looking at how some of these things can be applied to higher ed, because we have a lot of college and university students with food insecurity issues. And I'm pleased that Kara Gravely-Stack, who's leading the efforts at MSUM, is on the school board in West Fargo. And I know that, you know, just having this as a model and looking at maybe some of the things that we might do to adapt that to help our college students is really helpful.
Yeah, that would have been helpful for me when I ate ramen noodles for like months on end. So that's really cool. Mandy, did you want to piggyback off anything with that?
Sure. I don't have a whole lot, new to say or to add as far as the West Fargo City Commission goes, but I just want to say this is a program I'd heard about a little over a year ago that I thought was a really neat idea. So to hear that we're doing this repack program in the West Fargo schools, I think it's so exciting, and I'm so happy to hear it. So I'm absolutely thrilled with everything Dana had to say. As far as community gardens, I did reach out to the head of the West Fargo Park District, and I did have a conversation with her about it. I guess West Fargo, we did used to have some gardens right in my own backyard, literally. But they decided to end the program, unfortunately, and she didn't seem super thrilled about bringing it back. I did visit with a couple of the West Fargo City staff on it, and there was maybe a little more openness on it as far as if we had an open lot or something that we weren't using for any other reason. The problem they were worried about was logistics and the cost of getting water out there. But after sitting with this commission right now, it makes me want to revisit that with the city staff and bring that idea back up again. Also piggybacking on what Deb was talking about with vector control, that's an issue that I know a lot of our residents have expressed concern about. And then Arlette brought it up as well, that Fargo was going to visit that. So I think West Fargo would probably definitely be open to revisit that conversation and, follow along with what the rest of the community is doing. So that's about all I have.
Thank you very much. Great stuff all around. Any other questions for anyone on the city of West Fargo? Spotlight. Thank you for doing that this month. Wonderful information. Our next item then would be incorporating food system language into planning documents. issues, brief, and a snapshot, which kind of goes off of what I was just talking about with Clay County's comp plan. So Genesis, I believe you are going to speak on that.
Yes, I'm going to speak on that today.
Thank you.
Should I share my screen? Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. There we go. Okay. So hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Genesis Pierre, and I am a dietetic intern here at Fargo Cass Public Health. And today I'm just going to provide an overview on the draft issue brief and the snapshot, documents dealing with incorporating food systems language into comprehensive planning documents. And these documents were included in your meeting packet for today. So a little background to those of you that are new to the Food Commission. Over the years, we've worked on a number of these documents, and the idea behind them is to do background research and provide resources in case a local community decides to move forward, move certain food systems issues forward. And to date, we have about 20 of these documents with topics addressing urban agriculture, food access, food waste, and so on. At our March meeting, Adam did a presentation that introduced this topic, and he discussed comprehensive planning and the importance of addressing food system issues in these long-range plans. So today I'm going to review what's included in this draft issue brief and snapshot, and we would just like to get any input that you may have on these documents. All right, so the first document that I'm gonna go over is the issue brief. And it starts out with background information and a definition on what a food system is. And there are actually 6 basic elements that are included in a food system, which you can see in the simple food system diagram on the left. And those 6 basic elements are production, processing, distribution, access, consumption, and waste recovery. But we also know that there are a number of other outside influence that can impact a food system, and that can be seen on the in the complex food system diagram on the right. And that includes social, economic, and environmental issues. So a perfect example of that would be how this past year there have been disruptions and emergency food needs brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. So when we address food system issues, we need to consider that and address these potential influences as well. Addressing food system issues and local planning efforts can play an important role in improving the health and the future of the community. So healthy, sustainable local food systems bring economic, environmental, and social benefits to a community. Food systems planning can help maintain and grow economic opportunities in food sector jobs and businesses in areas such as agriculture and food production, food processing, food retail, and so on. And then sustainable farming practices can reduce the amount of energy and resources that are required for food production. And increasing the availability and access to healthy, fresh food can impact health. As Adam mentioned in his March presentation, one planning document that cities and counties use to guide future actions of communities is the comprehension plan. So comprehensive plans have, they're like strategic long-range guidebooks for jurisdictions, and they include a community's vision for the future and goals, policies, and strategies that will be used to achieve that vision. These plans provide guidance on a wide variety of physical, social, and economic issues, and they're written to provide direction for future activities over a 25-year period. Local planners actually have begun working closely with public health extension and other professionals dealing with food-related issues to integrate food system considerations into comprehensive plans. According to the American Planning Association, there are 5 food system-related areas commonly addressed in comprehensive plans, and those 5 are rural agriculture, food access and availability, urban agriculture, food retail, and waste. So this slide kind of shows a few examples of how these 5 food-related systems could be addressed in a comprehensive plan. And I'm gonna see if I can do this. Okay. So for example, like rural agriculture, you want to ask yourself, is there enough land allocated and preserved within a community to support local farming enterprises? With food access and availability, is there public transportation available to people without vehicles to provide access to grocery stores? Urban agriculture, does the city have an ordinance allowing for operation of a community garden, boulevard gardens, or urban farm? With food retail, are healthier food options priced lower compared to unhealthy options at restaurants and grocery stores? And then with food waste, do local restaurants have access to city or county-wide composting program to handle excess food waste? So a few things to consider regarding food systems planning would be like food system issues and how they might look different in different communities. And city issues will also be different than rural. Another consideration would be how food systems can be addressed differently in various comprehensive plans. So for example, some plans address food issues across throughout many areas, such as land use, transportation, agriculture, economic development. But then other plans can have a specific section designated to addressing food systems issues. Partners are also important to consider in planning food system recommendations. And then there are a number of resources available. So for example, the Minnesota Food Charter, the American Planning Association, and so on. And the issue brief actually includes a listing of these resources, as well as links to a few cities who have good examples of food system language in their plans. So with each issue brief that has been developed, there's also an accompanying snapshot document. And the purpose of the snapshot is to show how information in the issue brief is applied locally. For the snapshot document, comprehensive plans in 8 jurisdictions throughout Cass and Clay counties were reviewed, along with the FM Greenway Recreation Master Plan. So at our last meeting, Adam actually provided a quick overview of the food system issues addressed in most of these plans. So on the next slide, I'm only going to highlight a couple of the key points on each of these plans. And then the snapshot document also has a more complete overview of food system issues addressed in each community's comprehensive plan. So the snapshot document also includes a link to each of these comprehensive plans and highlights the pages where some of the food systems language can be found. So with looking over each of these plans, with the Fargo Go 2030 plan, that one was actually one of the first area comprehensive plans to mention food in one of its guiding principles, and also provides an example of how a comprehensive plan can guide local food systems work. So for example, one of the recommendations in the comprehensive plan was to form a food council or commission to address local food policy issues. And this drove the formation of our Cass Clay Food Commission, which we currently have today. The Cass County Comprehensive Plan is a very good example of including food system issues in a plan, and includes an entire section on addressing the topic. The Dilworth plan mentions the importance of preserving farmland and soil, and it also supports sustainability efforts. The West Fargo talks about walkability and mixed-use areas and the importance of including dining and grocery opportunities in those areas. Castleton emphasizes support for local fresh food year-round. Horace addresses improving healthy food access and economic development around food. And then both Moorhead and Clay County are in the process of updating their comprehensive plans. And the snapshot includes a link to each of those. So if someone is interested in being involved in the plan development, then they can access that information. And then in addition to comprehensive plans, local units of government around the country have begun to incorporate food access related goals and policies into other long range planning studies. A local example of this would be the FM Greenway Recreation Master Plan along the 30-mile FM Diversion Greenway. It incorporates a number of food system activities such as urban agriculture, community gardens, and pollinator habitats. And then at the end of each snapshot, there is a section on what local government as well as what individuals can do to support the topic. So as far as local government goes, they can support the topic by utilizing data sets to identify food deserts and locations where food access issues exist, so interventions can be targeted to address the needs of at-risk areas. They can also partner with the Cass Clay Food Partners to develop policy that supports a strong local food system. And then also considering funding a food systems coordinator to work with community leaders to address local food systems. And then individuals can support the topic by becoming familiar with local comprehensive plans and work with community partners and city leaders to implement recommendations. And then also by participating in public, that's supposed to be public, not pubic, input meetings when growth plans are being developed and provide ideas on how to address food system issues. All right, so that was just a quick overview of the issue brief and snapshot. And we'd like to open it up for any discussion, questions, or input on these documents.
Wonderful information, Genesis. Thank you so much. Questions?
I'm going to jump in here real quick. This is Taylor from the Great Plains Food Bank. Genesis, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the really detailed and actionable items that you've included in both the local government and individual action items. That was one thing I had a question about, and I think that what you've included is something that people can really tangibly and actively contribute to. So thank you for that.
Great comments. Thanks, Taylor. And anybody else? Well, thank you again. Very in-depth and informative. And like I think you alluded to, you can find links to all those different studies at each individual page. And I think Noelle also had linked something into the chat. Okay, our next piece then, if there are no questions, we'll move on to item number 5, which would be selling local food in our region. Noelle has some information on our frequently asked questions for that. Thanks, Noelle.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. Let's see, I was hoping I could add my PowerPoint into the chat to send to you guys, but it's not working. So we'll make sure that you get that as a follow-up. And I have a few links that you might be interested in checking out. I will get those posted when I stop sharing my screen. Okay. All right, you should be able to see my screen now. someone yell at me if that's not the case.
Got it. Thanks, Noelle.
Awesome. So I have the fairly nebulous topic today of selling local food in our region, or in our region. Shout out to Genesis with typos in our presentations today. So I am Noelle Harden. As you know, I'm the co-chair of Cass Clay Food Partners along with Kim Lepetsky, who is celebrating her granddaughter's first birthday today, so she couldn't be with us. What I'm going to talk about today is to provide an update on this body of work that we've been doing to develop frequently asked questions guides for residents. I'll also share a few resources around and information around cottage foods and selling across the state line in North Dakota and Minnesota. That is something that has come up, and I have cobbled together some information and done a lot of outreach on that. But I am not an expert on these topics. So please, as I'm presenting, if you have questions or if you want to clarify something, just jump in and interrupt me and we can get that addressed right away. This is a work in progress and not finalized. So if there's any questions or any concerns, please do share those. And then lastly, with time allowing, we will discuss additional food policy questions and topics that might be coming up in the community or in the jurisdictions. So first of all, just a little reminder, thank you, Adam, for this lovely map of the area that we serve. So we serve both Cass and Clay County, as well as the 5 municipal jurisdictions in the Fargo-Moorhead metro area. Why did we start developing frequently asked questions? This began as a part of our pandemic response to more easily answer questions from residents about local food policies. While we do have 20 or so blueprints and snapshots, etc., on our website, those, especially the blueprints, tend to be really dense documents, and you have to read them one topic at a time. And so we really needed something that was easier and more accessible as we were getting a lot of questions around these topics, as there was a huge kind of swell of interest in local food production when the pandemic began. This also gave us an opportunity, we've been active for about 6 years now, so this gave us a chance to update some of our blueprints that had gotten a little bit out of date. For example, Moorhead in 2018 started a new Boulevard Garden program. So we were able to get some updates on things that had changed, and then also clarify how policies are being interpreted. So the kind of case in point around this was backyard bees in Fargo. They're not explicitly addressed in the policy, and previously that was interpreted to mean that backyard bees were not allowed. But now the interpretation is that backyard beekeeping is allowed in Fargo for personal use. So that was one sort of shift that happened through that process of clarifying policy. And here is the shameless plug portion of my presentation. We published an article just last month, and you'll get a summary and press release about this later on today. But we provided a pretty in-depth case study of the work that we did between March and December of last year that was all related to extra work that we took on in order to help the community respond to COVID. So you can see this is one of the figures from the article that shows a timeline and some of the different activities that we were engaged in, along with our partner network, Food of the North. Then you can see that developing these frequently asked questions guides were just one piece of that body of work. All right, so the first frequently asked question guide was released, it was finalized in May of 2020. It addresses common policy questions related to urban agriculture, including gardens, vegetable gardens, boulevard gardens, pollinator gardens, and it has a section on gardening at an apartment as well. It addressed rules around composting and garden structures, mainly things like raised beds and greenhouses. And then it also looked at whether backyard chicken keeping or beekeeping was allowed. The information is most accessible, and we're really excited to be able to work with Food of the North because they have a very fantastic, easy to use website. And so for the municipal jurisdictions, they have this information from the first guide in the urban agriculture section of their website. They don't yet have the 2 counties, but we have that information in a little bit more cumbersome format. But you can see a link there where you can access that guide. And like I said, I'll post these links once I get done presenting. So we, in kind of fits and starts as we've had time, we've been working on this second frequently asked questions guide. This has been more complex and will require some additional back and forth with the jurisdictions. So our process, first of all, Adam is really instrumental in developing these guides and doing the initial scan of what the policies are. And then I work with the planning departments in each jurisdiction to have them review the information, add information that's missing. We're waiting on a little bit of info from West Fargo, but we will be sending this out to all the jurisdictions once again before we make it public. And then as I'll kind of flag as I'm speaking, there are some areas where we need a little bit more clarification. So a set of questions addresses topics more related to kind of sale and processing local food. So we went to the jurisdictions and asked about residential sales of produce and honey, processing game and small livestock in residential areas, cottage foods and selling across the state line, which are more addressed at the state level, and then donating local food, which is actually federal policy. Okay, and I do hear a little bit of background noise, so I'll just remind folks, if you are not muted, that we can hear you. So
Jim, I think you're.
Want to mute yourself.
I think it's Jim.
All right. Well, I know I have a loud voice, so I will just keep going. No problem. So the first topic was selling produce on residential property. So the idea, if you had a huge garden and wanted to sell some vegetables or fruit at the end of your driveway, are people allowed to do that? So across all the jurisdictions that we've looked at, this is in general permitted. It requires a home occupation permit and or to follow the home occupation rules. It looks like some jurisdictions like Moorhead require an actual permit and a conversation with the city about what you're doing. Others might just list out the rules like hours of operation and ask you to follow those. And this applies to produce that you grow yourself. Selling honey, this was a lot more interesting. So in general, this is also permitted across the jurisdiction. However, beekeeping is not permitted in most of the jurisdictions. So Cass County, you check with the township. I believe Clay County, it's allowed. I would need to double check, or Erica can correct me. In Fargo, it's only allowed for personal use. So you can sell honey in Fargo, you can keep the beehives in Fargo, but my understanding is that you cannot sell the honey from your hives in your backyard in Fargo. So you might be asking, well, why would we allow honey sales but not bees? My impression is that you could have a beehive outside of the city limits in an area where it is allowed, on a farm. This is a common practice that happens where people who keep bees have multiple hives set up on different property. And so if you are in that situation and then wanting to sell that honey at your residential property and you have a home occupation permit, and you're following the home occupation rules, then you should be allowed to do that. This is one of the areas where I will be getting clarification from all the jurisdictions. Okay, so moving further down the complexity spectrum, we asked about processing game or small livestock, if small livestock are allowed in that area, if that's something that is allowed in residential areas. Both Moorhead and Dilworth indicated that processing of game is allowed in small amounts. They don't want the sewer systems to be overwhelmed, but it must be out of view. And Moorhead has a little bit more specific language around what that means to be out of view, and with proper waste disposal as well. In Fargo, this topic isn't addressed except in the backyard chicken policy. It's prohibited to slaughter chickens. In Clay, it's not addressed, but if it's something that you'd be doing for commercial use, it would require a home occupation permit. Cass County, like pretty much all of these policies in Cass, it's likely permitted, but you need to check at the township level. And then with both Horace and West Fargo, we're continuing to work to get some clarification around this. This was the topic that generated the most kind of back and forth and taking a deeper look at what the policies are. So it was really interesting to work through that. Okay, so then to selling cottage foods on residential property. So cottage foods generally are what you see in the picture, your canned foods, your baked goods. The two states do define cottage foods differently, so that it's important to keep that in mind. But generally speaking, they're the canned goods, the baked goods, and a few other things that are lower risk and less regulated, not requiring licensing, commercial kitchen use, but they can be done at home. So in general, cottage foods are permitted to be sold from residential property. Surprise, surprise, it requires a home occupation permit or to follow the rules. It only applies to cottage foods that you produce yourself. And then Minnesota and North Dakota both have separate state cottage food policies. And this is an area where I have really had to lean on colleagues and partners and do a lot of just reading these policies. So definitely, if you have questions, just jump in. I know Jeremiah probably knows a lot more about this than I do. But generally speaking, Minnesota passed a cottage food law in 2015. It refers to non-potentially hazardous foods, and it looks at things like what is the pH and what is the kind of known risk level. Things like pickles, which are very acidic, those are non-potentially hazardous. Other things like pressure canned green beans and things like that might be more towards the hazardous side of the spectrum. Okay, it includes, in Minnesota, this includes registration, food safety trainings, and it has a sales cap of $18,000 annually. Acidified foods cannot cross a state line, but in Minnesota, baked goods can if the other state allows it. But my understanding of the North Dakota policy is that it does not allow cottage foods like baked goods and canned goods to come in from other states. And the key contacts, the Minnesota Farmers Market Association has really done a lot of work in writing this policy and educating this policy and implementing it by doing lab testing of recipes and things like that. So they're a really great resource on this. The Minnesota Institute for Sustainable Agriculture is a wonderful resource as well. And they also have fact sheets product by product that review all the regulations, including interstate commerce and things like that. So I really recommend those two sources. And of course, Extension and the Department of Health are always good go-tos with these types of issues. I have colleagues who do cottage foods and food safety trainings as pretty much their entire job. So we have people who are super knowledgeable about that and would be happy to tap any colleagues for future presentations on this. North Dakota Cottage Food Act of 2017 has a more expansive definition of cottage foods. It's been contentious, if anyone's been following this, around the kind of scope and whether or not there can be penalties and the implementation. But the policy has been upheld in court that was passed in 2017, as far as I know.
This is Rita. The court case has been settled, and there was new rules released here probably 3 months ago or so. I don't know for sure what they are. I've read it, but I can't tell you the difference right now. But
awesome.
I'm pretty sure it's wide open.
Yep, that's my understanding as well. Thank you so much for jumping in. That is my understanding as I've been reading up on this and kind of how it's played out. But thank you, Rita, for confirming that. And I'll make sure that we get, links out to these actual policies and whatnot as well. Okay, so no interstate commerce is allowed with this policy. And then the contacts are the Department of Health and NDSU Extension. All right, so we looked at a few other areas of interstate commerce. Raw whole form produce that hasn't been cut or processed is allowed to go across the states without regulation or licensing requirements. Meat must have a USDA federally inspected seal. So this is another complicated one because Minnesota actually allows out-of-state sales of like custom exempt processed meat, which is a lower inspection threshold than USDA or state equal to. However, my understanding is that Minnesota would not allow consumers to go into Minnesota, or North Dakota would not allow consumers to go into Minnesota, buy a half or a whole or even a quarter cow, for example, and then bring that back to North Dakota and have it for personal use. What I just described would be allowed by Minnesota, but is not allowed by North Dakota as far as I've been able to tell. And that is what I've been told by the North Dakota Department of Agriculture. But meat processing is kind of an endlessly confusing topic, and there are some different exceptions. And this is something that we could, bring in an expert and have more discussion on, because I know this has been of interest to this group. Eggs, they need to be registered in the state, possibly licensed depending on the amount of production. In Minnesota, producers who are selling eggs still in their shell would be allowed to sell those over the state line, but this is not clear in North Dakota, and it's something that I will be following up on. Processed food must be licensed in the state of operation and registered with the FDA as a food facility. And then for questions, I recommend starting with the State Department of Agriculture. And then they'll be able to tell you some of these areas fall into the Department of Ag, others fall into the Department of Health. And in Minnesota, we actually have a team that was formed by the legislature called the Food Innovation Team. And they help producers look at kind of weird food regulatory issues that aren't clearly addressed in existing policies. So there is recognition that, we don't necessarily have policies in place that address every situation with local food, and that we have a body that's able to kind of help producers work with inspectors and get a better understanding of those policies, and then also make recommendations back to the legislature about when they think policies should be changed. All right, and then the last one is an easy one. The Good Samaritan Act protects individuals, organizations, and businesses from liability when they donate food. And I am not aware of any restrictions about food donations crossing state lines. However, it's really important that if you're donating food, you should still follow sound food safety practices. Those can be found through Extension, the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Health. A few quick reflections. This, I think, has been important work for us to bridge sort of dense policy information, city codes, even our policy blueprints, to be a bridge with residents to try and navigate some of these issues. And what's really exciting in all of this is that selling local food on residential property is generally allowed in our area. That is not always the case. There are local jurisdiction and zoning codes that prohibit local sale of food from residential property. So this is really exciting that that's something that we are allowed to do here. There's a lot of opportunities to strengthen the policy, especially in areas that are just not addressed right now. But we've really found that having network capacity is a major limiting factor. And you heard this from Genesis earlier. You'll hear it from Kim and I more in the future. But we'd love to get back to a place where we have a network coordinator who can help us continue to meet the needs of residents in this way. And then none of this would be possible at all without partnership and support from all the local planning departments, the county planning departments. Shout out again to Erica, state agency staff who've helped with this, and of course Adam from MetroCrog has been instrumental. Okay, and that's all I got. I would love if you have questions or thoughts around what else the Cass Clay Food Partners can be doing to serve our community.
So I talked to a lot of cottage food businesses all year. And honestly, if we could develop a packet with at least pointing people to the resources and the current, because I mean, the regulatory landscape changes constantly, but a snapshot, because the confusion around it is pretty routine. And even since the last time I refreshed, I don't do cottage food anymore, but like since the last time I looked at the regulations, they definitely changed. I used to be able to sell my hot sauce when it was a cottage good in Minnesota, as long as I registered as a cottage food business in Minnesota. And that appears to have changed now. A lot of people want to follow the rules. So.
Here's an interesting thing with that I learned. So yes, you can make your hot sauce in Minnesota, and at a home. It doesn't have to be your home. But if you have an accommodating friend or relative in Minnesota who will let you use their home kitchen to make your hot sauce, you can sell it in Minnesota. If you want to make it at your home in North Dakota, you can't sell it in Minnesota.
Yeah. But this would be something really handy for organizations like the Red River Market and a couple of the other farmer markets that are getting started to incorporate with their sellers to help their sellers not run afoul of the rules.
I love that idea, Jeremiah. Thank you. And we just wrapped up a snapshot and an issue brief. So I think we can discuss it within the steering committee if we want to make this our next topic. But I think that's a really great idea.
Thank you.
Any other questions, ideas, burning food policy issues coming up in your area?
Any other questions for Noelle? Well, Noelle, now I maybe have a better idea as to what to do when my 7-year-old's 28 chickens start laying a little further into the summer. He is a poultry fanatic, so we'll have plenty of eggs. Any other questions? Great work, guys. I think the next piece would be the public comment opportunity. Are there any members from the public wishing to speak on anything that's not on the agenda? The only comment I would have is I think all of our jurisdictions are trying to figure out how is the best way to get information out to our public and to allow them to provide public input in a when we're doing business in a different way. And so my question is just how are the public getting this link? Is it still on our Facebook page? Is it still being advertised? How would a member of the public know that this is where they go to speak?
So the question is, how are we promoting the public comment portion of the Food Commission meetings?
Correct.
That's a really good question. We do send out the information on our Facebook page. That's a responsibility, frankly, that often falls to me and is not a strength that I have. So if anyone would like to become our social media volunteer, that opportunity is open. But we do always try and get it out there. And then MetroCog always sends out an announcement through their email list as well. I know that there was some interest and on other Facebook pages like Moorhead Equals Fantastic, our information was shared. But I really think that that's something that we could do a much better job of, and we would love any ideas or help from others in working on that.
Well, I guess the reason I raised this question is, when we were meeting in person, there was probably always 4 to 8 people that were regulars that would pop in from time to time. And now since we've been virtual, we haven't really seen those folks. And so I think, we'll have to decide at some point when we go back to in person, but like for our county's perspective, we are meeting in person, and we still have public comment opportunity, but we still have the virtual piece. And then at the end of everything, have a option for folks to submit a comment. So maybe that's one thing we could add, is just say, if you have a public comment and are unable to attend, this meeting, here's a link to submit a comment. Maybe that would be helpful, but I want to make sure people have the opportunity to take part.
Jenny, I have a question. It probably relates to the previous speaker, but I believe they indicated a link to information concerning pollinator gardens. If that person could repeat that link information, I'd appreciate it immensely.
Yeah, let's find that. Is it in the chat, Noelle?
No, what I will do, because I know it's frustrating to copy and paste things from the chat and save them, I can put all of the links into an email and get that to Adam, if that's okay, Adam, so that we can follow up with that. I can quickly though share the link that we have for the first frequently asked questions guide, which does address what the policies are around pollinators in all the jurisdictions. So I can get that posted in. And then I wanted to say, Jenny, I was just looking on our website and I thought that we used to have a link directly from our City of Fargo Cass Clay Food Commission site where people could submit public comments. I'm not finding it at the moment, but I think that's also a really good suggestion. And I try to let people know when I make the Facebook event or the post that they can send comments. But I think maybe before our next meeting, which won't be until September, we could do some more intentional, a few weeks before the meeting, mentioning that it's coming up and that we would love to start collecting public comments now, and even just have some that we'd be able to share at the meeting. I really like that idea.
Jenny, I have one other comment. It doesn't relate to pollinators. It relates to the Diversion Authority Greenway and the growing of produce. What I understand is that any contract or contracts let for the construction of the diversion facility will carry with it an obligation for that contractor to maintain the facility for 30 years. That may preclude any other outside utilization of that facility without the contractor's authorization. So people have to stop and think about the planning of that if in fact that wants to be moved forward.
That's a really good point, Commissioner Breitling. I know that the operation and maintenance piece is a 30-year, but I know at MetroCog, and maybe Adam, you can help me along with this, we've discussed how that doesn't necessarily affect, say, if a park were to go in there or the trails, for instance. We're still in the process of finding an organization to cover that. Is that correct?
That was sort of my understanding when we wrapped up the Greenway study last fall, but I haven't really been involved now in any of the discussion since, and the selection of the P3 contract or anything like that. So I guess I haven't been too involved in that aspect here the last couple of months.
Okay, and I don't know. Dwayne, are you on the diversion? Well, we're on land management together, but are you?
I'm not on the big board. I am on land management with you.
Okay. Maybe let's talk about that a little bit, because I thought that 30-year commitment was only for the core piece, not necessarily, the tieback levy, not necessarily the Greenway, but I think we need to clarify that. So thanks for bringing that up.
I just didn't want people to be surprised if there were some stumbling blocks into that process.
Well, we could call it the Dwayne Breitling Greenway plan, and then Commissioner Breitling can and his foundation can just cover it all for eternity, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. We got it on record.
I'm judgment proof, so I can cover it.
Sorry. Okay, is there anything else that I'm missing for public comment? If not, then the next piece would be the Commission and Steering Committee Roundtable. Are there any items that have not been brought forward yet in the discussion today that you'd still like to offer for?
This is Rita. I forgot to mention that my one colleague is working on little free food pantries. We have permission to put one up at NDSU. So far, working with the construction management team, building it, and with them stocking it. But we're looking for some more funding and partners for these pantries. So if you know of any organizations that would help us fund these buildings or cupboards for the communities, they're really similar to the little free libraries for non-perishable foods. We'd like an assistance that we can help with funding, building the stands, and organizations that would make sure they are filled regularly. So it's a big project of ours, so any help would be appreciated.
Thank you, Rita.
I received an email from Jeff Yark, at-large commissioner, right before the meeting. He wanted to share that RDO would likely be restarting its volunteer program for employees this summer. So if anyone had any volunteer opportunities where they could use a large group of volunteers for up to 8 hours, to get in touch with them.
Who was the member?
It's Jeff York. He's the newest at-large member.
Thank you.
Works at RDO. His email would be in the meeting invite.
I'll look for it.
Okay. Yep.
Any other commissioner input?
I was just going to say that there are still places for anybody who is interested in working in a community garden with the Growing Together Gardens. You could reach out to Jack Wood at jackstomatoes@gmail.com. I know especially in our brand new garden at Gethsemane Episcopal Church on Tuesdays, there are several openings, and it will be a very large garden. So there will be a very large sharing from that garden. So with 16 hours of work in the garden, you get a full share when food begins to be shared in July.
Thank you. There was a question in the chat from Commissioner Kaylee in regards to if there's still an effort from extension staff to create a drop-off site for excess garden produce from home garden to be donated to food pantries. That's a county extension question, not regional, correct, Noelle?
Yeah, it must be. Was that on the Minnesota side?
Yeah, it was just a question. I've not seen anything about that. That might, Commissioner Kaylee, that might be a question for Mindy Grant at the county extension.
Sounds good. I had seen something last year, and I don't know if it was just a last year thing or not, but.
The number at the office is 218-299-5020. I'm a lifelong 4-H'er. I know what that number is. Anything else for the good of the order?
Oh, I was just going to say to Commissioner Kaylee, I would also be happy to check with our county staff, with Mindy and Rosie, and look into that as well. If you don't want to memorize the county extension office's phone number.
Thanks, Noelle. Basically just wondering where, home gardeners can donate their excess produce and get that into hands.
I will add, I know we're talking about, a site where home gardeners can come and drop produce, and then that produce gets distributed to a number of food pantry sites. On the North Dakota side, there is a website, Hunger Free Garden Project. I'll have to confirm what that is, where people can actually go and find the sites accepting home produce, where they can go and see which pantries locally are accepting that produce, and then just deliver it directly to that pantry site. So I'd be happy to include that resource as well.
And now that my brain's working again, I think it was our Master Gardeners program that was involved with that, if I'm remembering correctly. But regardless, I'll look into it and get back to you on the extension side.
Okay, anything else? If not, our next first Fridays will be June 4th. They're looking at a outdoor event or field trip of some sort. Also for your notes, to note that there's no July commission meeting. We usually don't, but I know that's during the Red River Valley Fair and the Wednesday before the Clay County Fair, and I'm seeing that they're planning on moving forward with a safe alternative, so make sure and support that if you can. And then our next commission meeting will be September 8th, and maybe in person, maybe not. We'll roll with it. So anything else? If not, we are adjourned. Have a wonderful day, guys.